find out real soon. If you do, you can learn more about it. And Brian Shaughnessy works for Lighthouse Communications Consulting and Design, and he integrates CiviCRM with both Joomla and Drupal, which are two very powerful CMSs that both are appropriate tools for appropriate systems. And he's been involved in this a while. He'll tell you about CiviCRM and how to mix the two, because very often, especially if you're working for the nonprofit section, besides the content on your site, it's important to be able to track raising funds, because it is a nonprofit. There's no real business model except to get money. So with that, introduce Brian. Enjoy. I'm going to my own session.
Thanks, Scott. All right, I'm really glad to be here today, and glad that Joomla wanted to have a session on CiviCRM. I'm just curious, how many people here are using or thinking about using CiviCRM? Okay, cool. So we got about half people, and then the rest of you are just curious about it. Okay, that's good. All right, so here's my goals for today. It's somewhat challenging to set goals for a session like this because CiviCRM is a very large application. It really is, multiple times larger than the code base of Joomla. It just has a ton of capability to it. So it's very challenging to try to decide how we're going to approach this. But my goals for today is to kind of introduce you to the software, provide an overview of the features, and I want you to leave with a better understanding of the capabilities and the possibilities that this can provide to you. I am going to do a book raffle. So I was a co-author in a packed book that deals with CiviCRM. I'm biased, but I'll say anyway, I think it's a great book. So if people want to drop their business cards up here, I'll just mix them around and pick one. If you already have it, don't enter the raffle because I want someone to have it who's going to use it. All right, and then just tomorrow I'm going to talk about some tips of the trade for developing and customizing the software. So if you're interested and you want to take this a step further, maybe I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so what is CiviCRM? So it's in the open source constituent relationship management software geared towards the not-for-profit and civic sector communities. And I'll give you some examples of what that might mean. Web-based, obviously, it integrates with Joomla. And open source, I repeated that twice, but I think it's significant. It does adhere to the AGPL, so it's freely downloadable, and you can just do whatever you want with it. And it's localized in over 20 languages. It really has a broader language base than that, but we kind of limit it to, when we promote it, to the languages that it has a more full set of translations for. So integration, it integrates with your website clearly. And it integrates with Joomla, Drupal, and WordPress, which makes it kind of unique. I don't think that there's many, if any, other extensions for Joomla that also have this opportunity to integrate with these other, kind of the three big open source CMSs. Why does it matter? It significantly expands the community of developers for CiviCRM. And that, I want to pause and reflect on that because I think it's really valuable. Civi is a very community-oriented, community-developed software. And you've got these not-for-profits around the world who are implementing it. They decide that they have some functionality they need, and so they invest resources, they contribute it back to the core code base, and it moves forward. Very community-oriented. And because of this multi-CMS integration, you just have a much larger community of organizations that are contributing back. And also support. One of the reasons that I started really just doing Joomla integration, and one of the reasons I felt comfortable getting into Drupal is because there's a few points of contact with the CMS, but for the most part I'm working within the extension and the code base is identical. So it's easy to flip between them. Also pushes the project forward faster than it would otherwise. I want to dispel some rumors. If you have been around and you've heard of CiviCRM before, it used to have kind of a bad rap in the Joomla community as not being fully integrated. And I really want to dispel that rumor. I think that the reason it had that myth was because in earlier versions before Joomla 1.6, you didn't have the permissioning capabilities that we now have. But with Joomla 1.6 through 2.5, we now have really full-fledged integration with the software. There are obviously going to be third-party extensions that are unique to a CMS. And that's true, there's plenty that are geared towards Joomla that are not available for Drupal and WordPress, but that's just the nature of the beast as well. The one thing that is significant is that the code base is different than what you're used to. If you're a developer and you're used to getting into a Joomla extension and seeing an MVC pattern, you're not going to find that in CiviCRM. So if you're planning on pushing forward with any kind of development with CiviCRM, you might want to come to tomorrow's session. I'll explain how that code structure is. Why is that so? Largely because it's CMS agnostic. It doesn't want to fully adopt one model, to the detriment of the other CMSs. All right, so who uses it? Here are just some examples. You can read through them. Charitable orgs, government, member-based organizations, political organizations. I mean, when I say not-for-profit, civic sector, that's a very broad, broad array of organizations that are using it here. Religious, local community groups, things like that. So really quite broad usage. Not all of these use Joomla. This is kind of a mix. I just wanted to throw out a bunch of examples there. Who built it? It's got a core development team, hundreds of developers around the world, very active community. There's trainings and meetups. If you're here based in New York City, there is a New York City meetup that meets, it used to be monthly. I think they're more like every other month right now. They're downtown. There's a development shop downtown that hosts that. And so that's a great way to meet other people and work together, collaborate on your development. There's also some annual conferences. Actually, CiviCon Europe is going on right now outside of London. So it's a very, like I said, active community. There's a lot of resources online. There's a free book online. There's the packed book. I will say that the packed book is a little bit outdated. It's a few versions old in terms of the software, but still pretty valuable in terms of understanding the system. So what does it do? Okay, it's a CRM, a contact relationship management software or constituent relationship management software. If you're used to a CRM in the commercial sector, you might have called it a client relationship management. That's really where it was born from. But it's a glorified database for managing your contacts. And as it relates to not-for-profits, that means I'm tracking memberships. I'm allowing people to register for events and tracking event participation. I'm doing case management. I've got constituents that contact me and I want to be able to track my interaction with them. I get a phone call, I get an email, I track all that so that when I come back later and interact with my constituent, I say, oh look, they're very active. They've been very involved in a bunch of events and they donated and they call on a regular basis, anything like that. I can handle grant management with, if I'm a grantor, so I'm disseminating grants to my constituents, I can manage some of that interaction there. And all of this is stored in a nice, wonderful database where I can extract the data, run searches, run reports, pull that data out, do all kinds of wonderful things with it. It is a contact-centric model, as you might expect. So I've got my contact, Ian Scott, in the middle, fictitious, and everything else is really oriented around that contact. We'll see that in the interface in a minute. I'm going to kind of flip between slides and the software itself in a few minutes. But all of these different things, my relationship with other contacts, the different activities that this person has done, the events that they've attended, everything is kind of surrounding this one contact record so that when I get into that contact, I have this wide-angle lens view of how they've interacted with my organization. All right, so I should have said this in the beginning, but feel free to stop and ask questions if you've got things that you want to. You got a specific question that you're curious about, be happy to stop and answer that. And I'm going to spend time on a few of what I would consider the more commonly used and major areas of the system, and just touch briefly on the ones that are typically less often used. But if you've got anything that you want me to push into a little bit more deeply, again, please stop me. All right, so as in the Joomla world, we've got a very strict separation between the front end and the back end. So when you log in and you get into the back-end interface of CiviCRM, you're typically a staff person working for a not-for-profit. And so you get in there and you can do your searches, you can view contacts, you can edit the contacts. You can pull reports. You can file any of these additional activities for a contribution or a donation, a membership, an event. You can do all that with the contact. The backend admin has a ton of permissions. I think that CiviCRM, because it kind of was born from more of a Drupal environment originally, where Drupal had the permissioning, when 1.6 came out and integration with the Joomla ACL happened, there was already this really extensive list of fine-grained permissions available. So it's probably one of the extensions for Joomla that has more permissions unique to the extension than any other. Over 60, and you can get really fine-grained, and that's very important in a CRM environment because you may have staff that you don't want them to see any contributions. They're not touching financials. You don't want them to see anything where money goes. You might have staff that's only involved in event registration, so shut everything else down. They can search the contacts, they can view events, and all those fine-grained permissions are available. And it's a growing list. It's kind of overwhelming. If you don't, well, we'll talk about configuring a system later. You don't necessarily have to see all 60 of those. Then, in addition to those 60, there's additional internal access control tools. That doesn't actually integrate with the Joomla group, ACL group, that will allow you to limit the contacts that a person can see. So if you've got an organization that has regional affiliates or chapters, okay, and you want to allow some of those chapter presidents to have some limited access to the system, you can actually further refine what they can have access to by saying this chapter president can only see contacts within their chapter. And so we lump all their people into a group, and we say that this person can only see contacts in that group. So a lot of control here. And again, I'm just trying to throw out there the opportunities that are available. And then, in terms of benefits, this probably sounds like a sales pitch as much as anything, but the big benefit to staff of your not-for-profit is that they're not limited to a desktop-based database to access contacts. They go to an event 3 states away, and they can be registering people for that event who are registering on site while they're there. As long as they have an internet connection, they can remotely connect. If you're working for a not-for-profit, then maybe you're an executive director and you do a lot of travel, you can have access to your contacts all the time. And I should mention too that in the latest release of CiviCRM, there's some new tools that have provided some mobile capabilities, some more advanced mobile capabilities, so that you can access things on your iPhone and such. So, a lot of benefits for that backend admin. In terms of front-end tools, the question is, well, what do I expose? What's called a personal campaign page. You might have seen this if you do things like, the MS Society does a bike ride, and you say, I'm going to ride 25 miles, I'm going to go solicit my own donors who are going to support me, but all that money obviously goes back to the organization. There's that type of capability built into the system so that people can donate and then choose to construct this personal campaign page, and they can add photos, modify the text, send links out to their friends, and the money comes through them or through their personal campaign page, but then obviously goes to the organization. They get some credit for it. They get what's called a soft credit in that contribution. Contact search listings, you can do things like have a searchable directory of contacts on the front of your site. You can allow people to log in and edit their own contact record and control what fields they have access to so they can manage their own address. You can have event information pages, registration pages, listing pages, participant listing pages, mailing list subscription forms, a lot of other things, but this is kind of a quick snapshot of some of the big ones that people tend to use. And again, key benefit, single data source, real-time integration. Someone comes to your site, they register for an event, that's immediately in your system. You don't have to export, import from a third party. You don't have to get an email that one of your staff people manually enters into your contact database. Everything is within a single data source, and it happens in real time. All right, so at this point, that's kind of the introduction, wide-angle lens overview. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start to walk through and delve into some of these features in a little bit more detail, and I'll flip over to a sample demo website that I have up and running that you can see how things work. All right, so we've got a contact record. That's the heart and soul of what we're doing here. That contacts are broken into three main categories: individuals, organizations, and households. An individual is a person, an organization is another not-for-profit, a community organization, a company, whatever it might be. Households is kind of the one that's a little bit strange to get your mind wrapped around. Basically, it's a collection of contacts that live at the same house. So if you're a donor-based, a charitable organization, a lot of times you may have to deal with, okay, well, I've got this contribution that comes in. It doesn't necessarily always come from an individual. Sometimes it comes on behalf of a household, and I want to be able to track that accordingly. And then we have contact subtypes. So you can you can define your own subtypes of contacts if you want to. So you might have individuals, but you want to break those into students and teachers because you're working with a school. Or maybe in that household model, you want to distinguish a household that contributes from a family trust, which is really a unique identity that may be donating to your organization. So you want to define a subtype. So you've got a lot of flexibility with defining your contacts. There's a tabbed interface, which we'll take a look at in a minute. Some nice features like inline editing so that you can be very easily interacting with the data. We'll see that. And within that contact record, you can take action. So let me jump over here to a demo site that I did here. So I just, I grabbed a template from Shapefile and installed it, and it was a nice not-for-profit, charitable org-looking template, and installed Civi on it, threw a couple records in there, and kind of seeded it with some data. There's not a whole lot of data here, but enough for us to see what's going on. So here I've got a sample of a contact record. This is Mr. John Doe, which shows up in a lot of my demos. He's a popular guy. And so you can see here from the interface, I'm in Joomla. I'm in the back end of Joomla. Civi inserts its own custom menu because there's just so many features that it needs to be able to provide to you. And that is a customizable menu, so you can move things around. I threw some things under other tools just to simplify it a little bit. I've got a quick bar here where I can create new contacts, create new records of various types, and then I've got my contact record here. This is, like I said, a tabbed interface, and I've got everything enabled. Okay, that's one thing that we'll mention later. I'll just mention now. So CiviCRM is very configurable. As much as you're likely going to have situations where you have to customize and kind of mold it to the needs of your organization or the organization you're implementing it for, it is still very highly customizable and configurable through the interface. So if I don't use pledges, or I don't use cases, or I don't have any need for grants at all, I can just shut that capability down. And when I shut it down and disable it, then I don't have that tab. I won't have the appropriate menu item at the top. I've stuck grants under other tools. So that would just seamlessly disappear from the interface. I don't have those reports available. I don't have those search tools available.
Be made per type of contact? Like if this were the student, could I turn off events, activities?
You can do some of that through the permission. So
Okay.
if that student does not have access to Civi Contribute, the Contribute tools,
Right.
then you don't give them that permission and they don't have that tab.
Okay.
So, and then, for the most part, I think you probably can, you can provide most of that control simply through the permissioning on that contact type basis or, that type of model. You're always going to find things where they've got some unique thing where they say, I have a custom field that I created and I don't want a certain contact type to see it, and you got to do some customization to hide it.
Okay.
I should mention that, that's right, I'll do it later. I'll talk about extensions later. All right, so I'm back on here. I've got my tabbed interface. This is the main summary screen. It's got things like my phone and my email. Any of these can have multiple records attached to it, so I've got 2 emails here. Well, they're the same, but that's right. I've got 2 phone numbers, a phone and a mobile, 2 addresses there. The new version of CiviCRM has inline editing I mentioned, so I can come over here, for example, and just click and edit that little block of content there. In older versions, if you're familiar with older versions, you would need to come up and click edit, and that takes you to a full-fledged edit form where all of the fields are editable. But inline editing is a nice new feature in the current version that helps me kind of not have to load a full screen and just interact with that one chunk of data. I've got some privacy options down here. Just one comment about that. You'll see that I've marked this person as do not SMS. There is some new SMS capabilities in CiviCRM, so you can, it does involve integrating with a third-party SMS provider, and there's costs involved in that, but the integration is available to CiviCRM. If you've got anyone that says, I do not want to be phoned, do not want to be emailed, do not want something, then that's going to show up in red, so you can see very, very clearly. And if you do have a situation where someone says, I do not want to be emailed, and you actually have an email address on file for them, Civi will shut down the email capabilities and not let you email to them. If you send out a bulk email, a mass email, and that person is included, they just won't get it because they've been eliminated by virtue of their personal communication preferences. All right, so I'm not going to go through all of this. It's pretty self-explanatory, basically the contact data for this contact. Let me just mention something down here. This is custom data. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I just want to point out that you have a lot of flexibility to create your own custom fields. And like I said, we'll get into that in a minute. So let me also go into the edit page here, since I mentioned that, because it is a common interface. So because there's so much data that we are potentially working with CiviCRM, they're constantly using things like tabs and panels and things like that to help you streamline what you're viewing. So here I'm in edit view. I've got my contact details. I've got phone, email. I can add new records here. But then I can collapse that panel if I want to and see that I've got my custom data here. I can expand my address panel. Okay, add multiple addresses, classify them by type. This is a home address, a work address, a vacation home. Communication preferences, demographics, that's male, female, other things like the date of birth, date of death, and then tags and groups, which we'll talk about in a minute, are a way that you can classify your contacts. Okay, so you can edit all those details in one large but paneled form, or you can do it through that inline editing. Tabbed interface, I've got little counts there so I can clearly see if I've got contacts, I've got records within each of those. Mr. John Doe is a generous guy. He's contributed a few things here. So he's got member dues here, and he's made a couple donations. One of them was an online donation through my Donate Today page, which I'll show you in a minute. One of them was a back-end donation. The staff person got in here and said, oh, he just gave us $250. I'm going to log that here. Contributions are all categorizable. And there's options to perform that with a transaction with a credit card, or to have what's called a pay later transaction. The person is basically promising to pay with a check or cash at a later point in time. Pledges, memberships, so he's got one membership here. Activities is a nice little panel here. Activities is sort of this stream, an activity stream, I think is a good way to treat it and view it. But it's basically a list of all the points of contact that this person has had, including things like that membership they signed up for and the contribution. Log that phone call because he was interested in joining a committee. Okay? And that way, when you come back, or a different staff person comes back at a later point in time and they get in here, they can see this history. They know this person has been involved at the call before. They can reference that information. All right, tell you what, let me go back to my my presentations here. The reason I have a presentation is because I have to stay on task. Otherwise I get into the interface and I just start wandering around, and I know already I'm going to talk about some of these things. All right, so let me talk about some of these things, and then I'll go back and we'll look at that again. I tend to wander if I don't have a nice, clear roadmap ahead of me. All right, so we got that contact record. We've got the tabbed interface. Let's talk about the different types of records that I am recording for that contact. Activities, which we were just in a moment ago. That's your communication log. Person donated, they joined, they registered for an event, they phoned, they emailed. You could create your own custom activity types. So if you've got something that says they applied for a certain continuing education program that you're doing, you could have your own activity type that's going to capture that information. You can create custom fields for that and collect all kinds of data for it. We have something called notes, which are pretty much a place for miscellaneous details. The heart of a CRM is the R, the relationship. You are trying to create a relationship with your constituents. You're trying to know them better, to understand them better, to serve them better, to convince them to support you in a higher level. And so things like notes, little details about them. Hey, they've got a son or daughter in college. They're a diehard Red Sox fan. I'm a diehard Red Sox fan. Really important things like that, because they're a diehard Red Sox fan. You don't want to tell them about how the Yankees won last night in the 11th inning. So groups are a collection of contacts. That's how we kind of group people together. And there's two different ways that we group people in CiviCRM. There's simple groups, which is just a container in which I put people. That might be your board of directors. I just go through my database, find all of the contacts that are in that, and manually place them in that group. But then we also have something called smart groups, which are saved searches. If I routinely need to send mailings to all of my contacts in Wisconsin who have been with the organization for over 10 years, I could go and conduct a search, say, okay, the membership start date is older than 10 years ago, and their state is Wisconsin, and run that search, and then from that search, save it, and that becomes what's called this smart group. Tomorrow, if I've got someone who has been a member for 15 years and just moves to Wisconsin, they should be part of that group, and they will dynamically become part of it, because what we're storing is the search criteria, not the contacts themselves. So a lot of power with groups. You can do things like have hierarchical groups, so I can have this parent group with small groups inside of it. So maybe I've got 10 groups for my chapters, or let's say committee membership, and then I have one that says everyone who's in a committee, and I say, I make everyone in those other 10 groups part of this one group. I can do that dynamically. So a lot of nice features with groups. And then we've got tags, which is just a way to categorize and classify your contacts. There's two different tagging mechanisms in the system. One is a hierarchical tree, and the other one is free text tagging, where you can kind of create your tags on the fly. So let me go back and we'll just go to the interface. See, I have this little light bulb. That's my reminder that I have to go to the interface. I got to handhold myself here. So I'll go to the interface at this point. Okay, so we saw activities. Let me just hit some of these other ones. Notes. Has several good contacts. I don't know how well you can see this. So this person has contacts with the Department of, or the Health and Human Services Department, because they're really interested. They're working for an organization that provides food to needy areas of the world. And so that's what John Doe does here. So there's notes. Notes can be commented on, and notes can have privacy options. So I create a note for a contact. I can mark it as private, and hiding things from you if you're on a management level, but there is this option to have some level of privacy. And then notes can be kind of treated like a mini forum where you can have additional comments based upon the note. Tags, let me show you that tree, and free text tagging. Okay, so this person is marked nonprofit, and they're a charitable not-for-profit. And I have some keywords down here. This is the free text tagging, food relief, basic health. I mean, work in Southeast Asia. I could create a new tag on the fly, new tag, and add it. And then it becomes a new tag in the system. If I do another search at a point in time, new tag came up there because it's already in the system. So some nice, easy tools to be able to classify your contacts. And you can create as many of these tags as you want. I actually created this in the system, but you can, if you need to, you can break things out. If you've got political advocacy that you do, and you want to kind of separate that from areas where this person wants to serve, something like that. Groups, I didn't show groups, which is good, real quick. So John Doe is part of one group. I added him to the advocacy team because he's got contacts in an important department at the federal level. Okay, add, remove. I got a handful here, so I could add him to that group, any of those groups I wanted to. All right. Relationships, another really powerful tool here, and we're doing good time. I know I'm moving, but again, stop me for questions. So a relationship is a very powerful tool here in CiviCRM. It's basically a way that you tie two contacts together. Just a relationship between any two contacts in your system. It doesn't have to be two individuals. It can be an individual in org, individual in household, you've got any kind of hierarchy like that in your organization, then that's very powerful. You know, let's say there's other people that are employed by Worldwide United, I would easily not so employer-employee is the one that is most common as far, but spouse, you know, there's no hierarchy there. It's the peer relationship. Household member. All configurable in the system. You can create as many relationship types as you want and can build that out. The cool thing about relationships is that you can define them as active or inactive. So if John Doe is fired from his position at Worldwide United for food, then I don't necessarily want to destroy that relationship. I can just mark it inactive because, you know, if he had, I want to keep that history. I want to retain as much history about this contact as I possibly can. So it can be just a simple toggle on-off. It can also be date-based. So if Brian retires, or John Doe retires from that, I can mark the end date for when that relationship ended. Or if that spouse, they divorced, I guess you can mark an end date for that as well. So that, again, gives you more insight into the contact.
So a person can have multiple relationships.
Yes, and most often, you know, most of the time we'll get. Yeah, that tab where I just showed one could potentially have, actually, I showed you the tab from Worldwide United. If I go to John Doe, he's got a few relationships here. So he is involved in, or actually, I was logged in, so I am, I guess I marked him. So he's the homeless services coordinator for Brian Shaughnessy, which is a case record that I created. He's the spouse of Jane Doe, who also shows up in all my demos. And he's the employee of Worldwide United for Food. There is some limited permissioning options that you can do with relationships. And it's a nice feature. I'd like to see over time it be expanded. But basically, I can go into a relationship and I can say that contact A is permissioned to access the record for contact B. And to be able to, through the front end, through the front of your website, to be able to do some editing for that contact. So let's say Worldwide United has 10 people in the system, but I only want one person to be able to edit the record for Worldwide United. Now, organizations don't log into websites, people log into websites. So only individual contacts can have a user account in Joomla. But John Doe, let's say, is permissioned to edit Worldwide United. Then he can log into the system and we can expose a form whereby they can say, okay, well, I am allowed to change the address for Worldwide United or something like that. So there is some basic permissioning. It's really just an on-off switch. A is allowed to edit the contact for B. But with that, I mean, that's kind of the biggest use case is you want to permission certain staff people to edit the organization record. That's the primary use case for it. Okay, I mentioned custom fields earlier, and we saw that on the contact summary screen. This is arguably one of the most robust and powerful tools that CiviCRM can provide for you. Because if you're working for a not-for-profit, if you're a developer and you plan on implementing CiviCRM for a not-for-profit, you will have lots of strange, crazy, odd data that is very unique to that organization. Now there's always going to be the core set of data, phone, email, things like that, that's all built in. But you're going to have other things you want to collect. And so with the custom field tool, you can extend the system in many different ways. The thing that custom fields do is that they extend an existing data object. So by that I mean you've got a contact record, and I could extend that contact record with certain fields. I can extend a registration for an event with certain fields. I can extend a membership record with certain fields. And it simply extends that one record. Okay? So Brian registers for an event today, and you have a custom field for a meal choice. And he says he wants the beef option. Okay? But 2 weeks later, he has another event. You have that same field available, but he doesn't want beef, he wants chicken this time. And then a month later, he becomes a vegetarian, he wants a vegetarian option. Okay, so you want that data to not be stored against the contact record, but against the distinct registration record, which is why you would not say I'm not adding that particular field to the contact, I'm adding it to the event participant record. Okay? Just an idea of what we're talking about here by existing data objects. This is a very incomplete list of what you can extend, but it's probably the ones you would most likely do. So contacts, you can make that more specific and say, I only wanted to extend the individual record or the organization record. I think if you saw on that summary tab, I had a field here for marital status. Obviously, organizations don't have a marital status, so that is unique to the individual contact record and is not present for organizations. Thank you, Bill. Events. Types. So if I have a specific type of activity that I want to add certain fields to, I can do that. It doesn't have to be universal to all activity types. Addresses, that's really handy if you need to do things like store Senate district, Assembly district here in New York State, or federal details about that specific address. A person may have 3 addresses in their contact record, and they may live in one county, work in another county, and you want to be able to store details about their location unique to that location. They may have a broader influence because they have different legislators that they're interacting with or something. Cases, really just about any type of record that you're storing in the system can be extended with custom data. Okay, so let's at this point talk about relationships, custom data, which is kind of a big thing. What I'm going to do at this point is get into some of the what we call the subcomponents in CiviCRM. So up until this point, everything is kind of the core heart and soul of the functionality. At this point, we're getting to things that can be turned on and turned off, depending on whether you're going to use it. And I'm just going to hit kind of the big 3 or 4, and then briefly review the other ones. So a contribution, which is a term that probably isn't generic quite enough, it really means any payment that comes through the system. So if you've got a member-based organization, you don't really view the membership fee as a contribution, then just understand that the contribution terminology is referring to any payment. One of the nice things that Civi has is it has a word replacement tool. So I mentioned that it's translatable, but a lot of times you don't really want to have a whole translation for your, you speak English, you're not going to have a translation for your organization, but you do have certain terms that you do or don't like. I have one, to use this example of contributions, I've got one client that really, really does not like the term contribution. They don't think that way, they don't use that term, they don't like it. So with the word replacement tool, which is just a tool within the interface, I can go in and say, anytime I see the word contributions, I want to change it to payments, make it more generic. So you can actually change some of that terminology and that language directly through the system if you want to, and it will just populate throughout. You don't have to do it through any kind of code-based customization. So any payment that comes to the system is a contribution. Contributions can be categorized. You can attach codes, accounting codes to your contribution types so that you can then later export it and import it into QuickBooks. There has been some, or other accounting tools, there has been some work that is in process right now and probably is a version or 2 away in terms of the CiviCRM release cycle, where there'll be some more direct integration with accounting packages. And they're taking the accounting structure of the code to a whole new level. So there's going to be some really cool things that you can do in the future. I mentioned before integrated credit card transactions. So there's about a dozen different payment processors that integrate with CiviCRM right now, maybe even more than that. So if your client uses PayPal, Authorize.net, or many of the others that are available, then you can integrate that in the system, and when people register through the front of the site or donate through the front of the site, or if your staff is handling through the back of the site, you can process that credit card directly through the system. So just a simple form, it runs the credit card, logs it in the system, and you're good to go. Some of the payment processors support recurring contributions. You want people to say, I want to donate $10 every month. You can expose a page that allows them to set that criteria, and it deducts it from their PayPal account or Authorize.net or whatever it might be on a regular basis. I mentioned the personal campaign pages earlier, which can make use of soft credits, which is simply to say person A is soliciting funds on behalf of person B. Or let me fix that. Person A is encouraging person B to donate. Person B actually gives the donation, so that contribution is against their record, but you want to give credit to person A. So I went and I got John Doe to join the association, and I got him to donate $250. Well, I didn't give that money, but the staff at this fictitious organization, they want to recognize the fact that I have been involved and helped to get that fund. So that's what a soft credit does. It gives me some credit for it. There's in honor of and memory of donations that you can do. So if you've got a model that is going to make use of that. Contributions, it should be noted, because it's any payment in the system, it's linked to your memberships and your events. So people can donate a member record and a contribution record. You might have seen that earlier. We'll come back and point that out. We can have contribution pages, which is what we expose to the front of the site, and also campaigns. You can set a fundraising target, and then there's nice little widgets, thermometer widgets that you can use to say, oh, how close are we to reaching our goal here? And actually, the thermometer widgets it's a very distinct set of code that can be put on other sites. So you could, let's say you've got a partner organization, you could give them your widget code and say, can you throw this on your site? And they can collect money on your behalf. And when people click it, they're going to be redirected to your site to actually do the transaction. But you can expand the breadth of your promotion for that campaign. All right, so let me just come back here. We saw this earlier. So here's the contribution history for Mr. John Doe, and here's the member dues. If I were to go into John Doe's membership record here, I would see down here that there's a linked contribution. So he's actually paid me $150. If he starts to renew next year and maintain that, we'll have a running list of the contributions associated with this ongoing membership. All right, so we've only been talking about the back end here, and it's now time to start jumping to the front end and seeing how this plays out. So here's my fictitious compassion organization, which again, I've taken the credit for the template. I just grabbed one from my Shaughnessy account. And, but it's a good example of, what I'm envisioning is this is a mission that is seeking to provide food for people in remote areas of the world. And so here I've got a couple sample pages. So let's go down to my Donate Today page. All right, so Donate Today. Here's just a simple form that we create. It's called a campaign or a contribution page. I'm seeding it with certain levels of contribution here. So gold, silver, bronze. I don't have to do that. I can come up with some very complex sets of options here if I want to. This was a very simple set. I can allow other amounts too, and if you need to, you can have minimum and maximum amounts. So if you don't want people to donate $5 through this form because it's not worth the fee that is incurred, or you don't want people to donate $1,000 through this because you don't want to eat that credit card fee, then you can limit what they can do here. They can contribute on behalf of an organization. That's very important, especially for membership-based organizations. A lot of times, the member is not the individual, but the organization, the company, let's say. And so you want to be able to collect that membership but have it attached to the organization, not to the individual. So I made it optional in this form, but you can make that required if you want. This is called a profile, and you can have multiple profiles on this. What a profile does is it collects the fields you want to expose to your front-end form. This one's simple, it's just name and address, but if you've got 8 other fields that you need to collect when a person becomes a member or donates to your organization, maybe you have a list of options where they can direct the money if they so choose, you can make that available through here. And then you've got payment options down here. So I have a non-working dummy payment processor. You can see that. And here's my credit card form. I could collect that right here. The billing address details, or it might be copied from above. If I switch this to I will send payment by check, which is pay later, then that goes away because I don't need to collect credit card anymore. And the person's contribution will be marked as pending. I haven't received funds yet, so I want to treat it like money in the bank. It's just hopefully money to be paid at a later date. So that will be marked in a different way in the system, and I can come back later when I get the check and process that. And then there's an optional, help spread the word, social media type of tool here. And so you can tweet it, Google Plus it, Facebook it, LinkedIn. You can share it, give them a link to it. This is on my just computer's local host, so that's why it's a really ugly URL. You probably can't even see it, but you get the idea. So this is just intended for donations. I have another example here. I'm going to break my rule, get ahead of myself, and have one that is for joining today. So this one is actually not collecting donations, it's collecting membership. And I've got 3 different membership categories that I set up here: a family membership, an individual membership, and a supporter membership. And I use the same field, so it's kind of boring. I did not enable credit card processing for this, which is why it only has the pay later tool at the bottom. So just ideas. I mean, really all I'm trying to do is give you an idea of what is possible, what some of these options are. Yes, you can set that. To do recurring or it's an automatic renewal membership too. So if someone says, I want to become a family membership, and that's a year-long membership, but mark it as recurring, as a renewal, then a year from now, their credit card or their PayPal account or however they use to integrate will be charged again. And the one caveat is that not all payment processors will support the recurring and renewal feature. So there's a grid on the CiviCRM website with a list of all the recurring, or with all the payment processors that are supported and some details about it. So you can go there and say, okay, if I really need recurring, I want to make sure I hit one of the handful that's supported.
Is that recurring? I'm thinking of somehow integrating that with QuickBooks or something. Is there any integration there where you would, let's say, someone signed up and I'm thinking of perhaps using this to start playing with it and maybe set it up for customers who I host their websites. That's a recurring thing. Okay. The way I have it set up right now is in QuickBooks, it's a memorized transaction. If they signed up on my website for web hosting,
yep.
Could I just pass it into QuickBooks?
So
that way, or is it not that well integrated?
There's no direct integration with QuickBooks at this time. There's been some work to kind of explore how possible that is, but you can export your contributions and then import them into QuickBooks. And with recurring, a recurring contribution simply means we're triggering a new contribution. So if you think of it this way, there's a profile that's set up that says the person wants to pay monthly, $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever, or maybe an annual recurring or some other. It can even be with recurring. It can even be odd things like every other month, and you can have established. So that's the profile. That's the definition of how frequently it recurs. But when that recurring contribution actually takes place, what happens is that PayPal or Authorize.net ping back to CiviCRM with what's called an IPN, if you're familiar with it. And that IPN actually then creates a new contribution for that contact. So if Brian says, I'm going to contribute $10 every month for a year, then I will see 12 different contributions for Brian, and they're logged when the contribution actually takes place. Because maybe I lose my job, and by contribution 8, I want to cancel that recurring profile. I can do that. PayPal will let me go back into my account or whatever and cancel that, so I no longer get it. I don't want in CiviCRM to see 4 contributions that didn't actually take place, and they won't.
So the recurring part is being triggered by the PayPal or the payment gateway. It's not generated out here.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, okay. So that's not going to work in.
Yeah, because CiviCRM doesn't store credit cards. That's one thing. I mean, that's.
Yeah, you probably can't. You have to have a secure platform.
Yeah, you'd have to have a lot of crazy for PCI compliance. So there's no need for it. So they don't. And so with recurring, what happens is that they're defining that with the processor, and then the processor triggers the payment, confirms that it actually went through, and then pings back to your CiviCRM installation in order to record it against the contact record.
Yeah, so there would be no reason then to even want to integrate that with QuickBooks.
Well, it depends. If you're using QuickBooks for your, for all of your accounting, then not all of your accounting is going to come through CiviCRM. So you would periodically export from
Yeah.
CiviCRM, then import into QuickBooks. And
After the fact, see, what I'm using the
Yes.
QuickBooks for is to remember to generate an invoice at the appropriate period of time. And
Mhm.
that's the piece that I would not need because that's coming from the payment gateway.
right.
Okay, got it, thank you.
When you say you can export, is there a tool that will show you your field map and will let you
Yep.
export? Okay.
So with, and I can show you that later. So with any, with a contact record or any of the contact's distinct sub-records, if you will, like contributions, you can do a search and then export. And when you export, there's kind of a default export mapping, which is, address, basic contact details, and basic, information about the contribution or the event, the membership, whatever it might be. But there's also a tool whereby you can choose exactly what you want to export, and you can save it as a saved mapping. So you come back later, like the default export, it tends to have a lot of fields that you're never going to reference, because it just, it has all the communication preferences fields and stuff like that, and a lot of them, are not necessarily applicable for importing into QuickBooks. So you don't want 8 fields in your export. You can define the 15 that you need.
I'm already partially seeing it up there, just trying to clarify. For taking payments or for signing up, you can have around. So we're looking for volunteers. We're also looking for people to pay for their camping reservation. But we're also looking for other people to pay other amounts. I can create multiple pages with those specific amounts per page.
Absolutely, yes.
This is-
Yeah, and we just saw 2. We saw the join today and we saw the donate today. And the donate today was geared towards donations. This is geared towards membership. Okay? And they're
also,
both,
like for a volunteer, I could have a page without a dollar figure.
right.
Just saying, sign up for more contact.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so if you're not doing any kind of monetary transaction, then that would be what's called a profile in Civi, which is really just a web form that you can collect data on. You wouldn't run it through the contribution tool, but you can have multiple profiles, you can have multiple contribution pages. Especially if you're a charitable that does campaigns, then you might have, hey, this is the, okay, so this is a hunger-based organization, so we're going to have the 6th Ave, Hunger Coalition next Saturday, and we want to raise lots of money for it. And so that's a very distinct campaign. You want the funds that come through there maybe to be in its own contribution type. You want to promote it in a certain way. You want to be able to isolate all the funds that come through that one effort. And so you can do that very easily. You can just create a contribution page for that. You can set that target goal. Hey, for this campaign, we want to collect $20,000 in the next week. And so you do that, you have your little widget with a thermometer, and you can track how much you've got, how close you are to the goal.
Is that widget, can you show it in the front end?
Yeah, I don't have any that are enabled, but maybe after I can just show you that. So that's an optional feature, so I just didn't enable it for any of the sample pages I threw up here already.
Are the fields in form, can you have conditional fields, like if you're married, then spouse's name appears?
No, so there's nothing in the interface that allows you to have those types of conditions. That would end up being customization. However, Civi wants to be customized, and there's a lot. I'll go through this tomorrow. But there's a lot of things built into it to facilitate that type of thing.
Okay.
Is there another question? Was there one on the way back? Did you have one? I thought there was one earlier. Okay.
I have a few questions, but I was waiting for more of a question period. Or...
I don't mind it on the fly here. If it's something that I'm going to cover later, I'll just punt it. Oh, sorry, a question.
The soft credits you spoke of before, can that be organised to send a referral, like a referral payment or a referral fee or a referral credit to their karma or whatever the person that created that soft credit?
Well, you can certainly do a search for your soft credit, the people who have done soft credit. And there is a little widget that you can enable called an honor roll, where, again, let's say you've got that personal campaign page and you want to give credit to a person who has, really gone out there and, been beating the streets for you. So you can have a running list of people who have solicited the most funds on behalf of your organization. Yep.
The only time I looked at CiviCRM, I spent a few days looking at it. I had a sort of like a preschool organization, and they had courses for kids, little kids till they were 5, and it was very important to hold the relationships, which was great because maybe the nanny's allowed to pick up the kid.
Sure.
Grandfathers are allowed to pick up the kid. It's really nice to put that in there. But my real question is like, is this really a huge product only for huge organizations, or does it scale? Because I do mostly smaller organizations. This particular one only had an office staff of like 3 people really, and I saw that there was a training issue, and where they weren't that sophisticated. They have use databases. You understand forms can do all kinds of things, but so could you just address that? Is this? And this is great for a big organization, but there's what do your projects tend to be? Are they all multi-tens of thousands of dollars enough, or can you ever find a $4,000 application?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because for a long time, Civi was only viewed as something for smaller organizations, and there are a lot of very large organizations that are now using it, but that's only in the last 3 years that it's grown like that. There's been a lot of performance gains as a result of attention given to handling millions of records, things like that. But actually, let me punt that question, because I have a slide later on where I just want to talk about the barriers, because there are some barriers, and I want to be very honest about it. So let me actually say that question, and we'll talk about that after. You had a question?
That was actually by a variation.
So let me
Same exact question.
Yeah.
I'll just mention that you can define your membership types. The terms, is it a rolling membership? Does it have a fixed start date? Is it a year, a month, 2 years, whatever? Auto renew options we've talked about. There's renewal reminder emails, so 30 days prior to expiration. If you want to send out an email automatically from the system, you can do that. You can extend membership to related records. So let's say the organization becomes the member, but you want all the staff, all the related employees of that organization to be perceived as members. You can have that automated. The membership just hits one contact and then filters through all the related contacts. So a lot of nice features like that. So yeah, stop me, but I'm going to work through this pretty quickly so that we can answer some of these other questions. 10:45 is when we're going to end, right?
Yeah.
Oh, but 11 o'clock is the next one, so we can buy a few more minutes. All right, events. I want to make sure we hit events, because I think a lot of organizations, that's probably the component in Civi, other than contributions, that's used the most. So you're using Civi to create, promote, collect registrations, display lists. There's RSS feeds that you can generate from it. There's modules for Joomla that can display, lists of upcoming events and with all kinds of fun criteria for that. You can allow registration of multiple people. So let's say that a parent is registering for themselves and their 3 children, or a staff person is registering the whole office for an event. They can do that and say, I'm registering 8 people at once, and just charge the credit card ones. You can have some nice features like maximum allowed registration. So you've got to cap it. You've got limited space. You can only have 50 people come. You can cap that, and then enable a wait list if you want. So people who, that 51st person, they complete the form, they're waitlisted, and then if someone else cancels or a new space opens up, you can then invite them to complete their registration. You can optionally have administrative approval for registrations if you've got something. Maybe you've got prerequisites, you need to make sure that the person actually has those prerequisites before you accept them into the event. You can have complex price sets. I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. By that, I just mean fee structures for your event. So, an event, you're going to have small events sometimes, like a seminar, a luncheon seminar, that's just a simple list, 1, 2, 3. But a lot of times, you've got a lot more complex options, especially for larger conferences and things like that. So you can have that type of flexibility. Date-based fee options, so if you want discounts if they register early, or you want to increase the price if they register late, which is the same thing, but has a different spin. Social media, we saw that before, same block. Schedule reminders a week before, hey, don't forget you register for the event, here are the parking details, that sort of thing. And then you can have personal campaign pages for events as well, so if you want people to be able to promote your event just like they would promote a campaign, you can have them do that. All right, so let me jump over here to my sample pages. We have a monthly luncheon. Oops, what did I do? Did I mess up my link? I did. this. Here's an annual conference, and so here's a price set. This has 3 different fields I'm collecting fees for. I don't know how well you can see this, but we've got registration fees. So that's required. A person has to register for one of these options. Conference only, conference plus the lunches is a little bit more, or just Thursday only. My fictitious conference is a 3-day conference. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And so I've got those options, they choose one. But then I got a banquet on Thursday night. And there's gonna be a big awards gala, you know, balloons, bright lights, dance floor, something like that. And so people, especially award winners, may want to invite their friends and family to see them come up and get a plaque that they're gonna stick in their attic. And so I can have a quantity box here. So this person orders 3 tickets for that banquet. So it's a different type of field you can construct as part of this price field. And then a checkbox field, you can have select boxes as well. I'm just trying to demonstrate the different options. And it gives you a running total, so conference, $350, 4 tickets, and golf for good, now $735 is what this guy owes. Okay. Complete my fields down here. Now for this one, I did not. I thought I added some fields. Oh, that's right. I've got my same payment options at the bottom, the payment processor or payment by check. This is a pretty simple form, but you get the idea. So person registers for the event, and then I can track it. And they've got the event tab, which I'm going to go out here for.
On the payment by check,
Yes.
are there any reminders when checks don't come in, or how does?
Any reminders? So there's no. So there's. You mean like where an administrator would get an email about that?
Yeah, some way of following up, like figuring out, you know, so-and-so registered, just said they were going to pay by check, and I don't have to check.
There is not something that would email you, but we have lots of like little reports here. So this is the Civi event, the event dashboard here, and so I've got my 2 events signed up here, and I don't actually have anyone registered for it. But if I did, I would have how many are registered, how many are not counted due to status. That would be someone who's pending; they haven't paid yet. So I'm not going to actually assume that they're coming, and maybe you would, and you can control that if you want to. But you know, maybe you don't; they're not counted. And then you can grab, from this configure option here. Actually, no, I'm sorry. If I actually had people registered, those would be hyperlinked, so I could jump directly into my registrant list. Now, there's also reports that you can do, and there's like 3 or 4 reports that tackle your events. And on the home page of Civi, there is, when you first get into the component from the component menu, there's a dashboard here, and the dashboard. I don't have any other reports enabled here, but the dashboard will provide you the ability to add little mini report snippets. This might not load because I'm out there. Okay, I'm on my local host and it's a little funky right now. So the dashboard allows you to take any report in the system, any report that you create, you can flag as dashlit enabled. And then you can put it on your dashboard and put it in the left column or the right column. So when you first log into Civi, you could have a list of upcoming event registrations who are marked pending. They have not paid yet. So you see that right away when you first log into the system.
You could set an activity or something also to...
You could. There are reminders, scheduled reminders. I'm not sure if there's one that you could do that sends you the notification. Well, actually, you know what? There is something that you can do. I forgot about this. So we'll talk about reports if we have time. And one of the features with reports is that reports can be emailed to you on a scheduled basis. So if you want to have a report that goes to your bookkeeper on Monday morning that gives the donations received over the last week, Civi will, through a cron job, it will generate the report, save it as a PDF, and email it to that contact. So you could do that with events. You could create an event report that has, your list of pending payments, and have that emailed to your address every day, every week, whatever you want. All right, so we went through events there. We've already talked about personal campaign pages. I'm not going to go through this anymore. Cases, just to quickly comment on what cases are. The case management tool is, again, if you're interacting with your constituents, you're building this relationship. If your constituents are contacting you because they need your assistance, okay? The New York State Senate uses CiviCRM, and so when you call your senator, in New York State and you say that you oppose or are in favor of a certain bill, then they go into the system and they'll log that for you. If you say, I've got a problem with a local government official and it's a big problem and you want them to step in and get involved, they'll open a case record for you. And then they'll track all of the interactions that they have with you and with the local official and with whoever else needs to get involved in that. Cases are, they do two things. They provide a container for communication. So all activities and communication that surrounds a certain topic, a certain problem, a certain issue, are now lumped together, but they also provide some workflow capabilities. So you can do things like say, well, if I log activity A, then I want to trigger another activity 3 days later. So you have some nice workflow type things. If you've got like a lengthy application process for a continuing education program, and the person has to apply, you send it back, they send you additional materials, it goes to the board for approval, something like that, then you can define that as a case workflow and then track that through the system. Cases also have an audit trail, so anytime you edit anything in a case, it doesn't ever delete, it doesn't ever overwrite. What it does is it stores a copy of that and creates a new record. So if I go in and I edit an activity in a case, then it's actually creating a new activity and storing the old one. So there's some really nice features. All right, so the other things that they have that's built into the system, pledges, that's a commitment to pay, a fixed number. It's a little bit, it's related to recurring contributions. The difference is that the person isn't authorizing you to deduct from their credit card automatically. They're simply promising that they're going to send the payment, and then you can send out renewal reminders. Grants, we talked about briefly, handling grant applications, dissemination of funds. And then a campaign is also a nice little container box where you say, I'm doing a membership campaign, several events, and a donation pitch, and those all are kind of connected in some way, so I want to stick them in a campaign. You can do surveys with campaigns, things like that. And then mass email, so there's bulk mass email capabilities built into Civi as well. The only thing about the mass email that you just need to be aware of is that you're either going to send it through your own server, and take on the responsibility of making sure that you are adhering to spam-free standards, or you're going to use a third-party SMTP provider, and there's lots that you can easily integrate with. The reports, you can have bounce tracking and click-through tracking and reply tracking, forward tracking, open tracking, and there are reports that you generate, so you see all that. Again, giving you a lot of insight into your contacts and how they're using the system. All right, lots of searches. Let me just show you the advanced, well, and the crunch time now.
I think you need to answer that question about
Yeah.
complexity.
Yes.
You're going to run out of time because I got to be there at 11.
Okay, all right. Well, let me just say that there's a lot of ways that you can search. Advanced search is the most powerful. It basically gives you insight into every single chunk of data that you have in the system. But then there's lots of other ways that you can get at your events, your contributions, your membership, build complex search logic, take action on those results. There's lots of reporting. I mentioned that. 40 plus reports come shipped. Those are templates, and you create your reports based on the templates and can save them, store them in a menu item if you want to, have them generated and mailed out, exported to CSV, produce a PDF. And I'm going to skip my configuration, other than mentioning again that you can turn things off, not just major components in the system, but let's say that you don't use IM at all, or you don't use tags. You don't need to use it at all. You can disable that from the system, hide it, it doesn't clutter things. So that really helps, especially smaller organizations, say, listen, I don't need 15 tabs available to me. I want to streamline this, only present the information that people are actually using. Very extendable, lots of, let me mention the advanced logging. There are new advanced logging features so that you can enable that, and every single time you hit the database, it's stored in a separate logging database. So that, again, provides a really good audit trail, and you can go back and review those. Okay, so my barrier slide. Civi is huge. Okay, it's huge and it's growing. It's very powerful. I think it rivals Blackbaud and Convio and Razor's Edge. A lot of these large commercial, expensive products out there, and there have been N10 and Idealware. There's been a number of surveys, and Civi routinely comes out very high when ranked against a lot of those commercial products. But it's complex. It is, and you know, there's definitely challenges to that. Can it be used for small organizations? Absolutely. And I work with a number of small organizations that use it. I mean, organizations with less than 2,000 contacts, you know, and like you said, 1 or 2 staff members. So yes, it absolutely can be used. But what you'll find, okay, here's what you need to know going in there. It's very possible that, you know, if you're a newbie to CiviCRM, or if you're working for a not-for-profit, that you can get into Joomla, you can install CiviCRM, you can go through the installation checklist and configure the system, and you can have it up and running and refer to, you know, books and online sources and run with it, okay? But there's great benefit in tapping into resources or developing them yourselves and really understanding the system so that you can, so you're more experienced or you have experience helping you decide what's the best way to construct these fields. What are the best tools to enable or disable here? What is the best way to implement such and such feature in the system? Okay, I'm a CiviCRM consultant. Like I said, I've built my business around this. Not just customizing, but a lot of times it's going in there and just talking to organizations about their business workflows and understanding what they do, and then helping them implement the software. So, you know, can it be used for small? Absolutely. And I'd like to think that, you know, especially it's become a much more mature software product. I'd like to think it's much more intuitive and much easier to get in there and configure. But, you know, it's big, and there are aspects of it that are complex, and so it definitely takes an investment of time and energy or outside resources. So, some of the other barriers that, you know, you can expect. Migrating data is always challenging. Now, there's built-in tools to import data, and they're pretty nice. I mean, they're quite adept at getting your data in there. But inevitably, you're going to have some piece of data that's crazy that needs to be like transformed into something else, and, you know, imported into some other area that doesn't have an automatic import tool. The import tools available are for contacts, activities, events, and membership. So there's a fair amount that can be imported from an external source, but that's always going to be a challenge. I mean, when I get projects, especially if it's, you know, I'm dealing with 100,000 records or something like that, there's a lot of data scrubbing. A lot of times you're doing a lot of work to really parse it out. So just be aware that that's a big piece of any CRM. It's not unique to Civi.
Is it a proprietary database underneath, or they're using
MySQL.
Oh, it
it
is.
just plugs into your Joomla database.
Okay.
Yep. You're always going to hit unique requirements. I should say always. 99% of the time. But you know, if you've got an organization that doesn't need any customizations, that's great. There's a lot that's configurable through the system. But understand, if you're a developer and you're thinking about implementing this for clients, be aware that not-for-profits are notoriously picky about how they want things and how they want it to work, how they want it to be viewed, and so just go in with your eyes wide open. And yeah, they've got their unique business processes. So there certainly are barriers, and like I said, there's a great community out there. The forums are very actively supported. Civi does have a core team of about 8 developers that are developing this full time. So there is this support mechanism, and they troll the forums. There's an IRC channel if you're a developer and you want to get on and talk shop there and try to figure stuff out. A lot of people are very supportive. Some good resources online, books online, the Pact book. So one thing that the Pact that we tried to do in this is really gear this towards implementers. So if you are thinking about becoming an implementer on behalf of clients, I'd recommend it. It there's chapters in there that just talk about understanding your data. It's almost, you can pull it out and treat it as non-specific to CiviCRM. But that's a huge piece of the puzzle here. Does that answer the question? Okay. Any other questions?
How long would it take you to integrate CiviCRM into an existing Joomla
You mean to install it?
without any customization?
10 minutes?
Okay,
Well, if you're really going to walk through the entire checklist, I would give it half an hour. But it takes a few minutes to actually install it. I will note that there's some online documentation about installing. You can't install Civi with the browse and upload a zip file because it's like an 11 megabyte file. So most web servers will not be able to handle that. So you need to upload it with FTP and unpack it, and then use the Joomla install from directory option. And there's documentation online if you want to kind of walk through that. A lot of people don't use that. I mean, it's an available option in Joomla. People just don't need
Do you have to
use
key it to your root directory?
I put it in the template directory because that's where
The
Joomla
template
puts it.
directory.
But
Templates, you said?
no, the TMP, because that's where all extensions are unpacked. When you do browse upload, they get unpacked there. So I just put it there anyway, and that's the default directory.
But you said, okay, 30 minutes to install. I mean, that sort of sounds like it's the mechanical part of the installation, but it really doesn't get you to, because I'm imagining that something of this size and complexity, if you haven't really planned, scoped, decided what am I going to use, what am I not going to use, when you get to the configure, you're going to be, so 10 minutes to install and 4 days to figure out what you should be configuring.
You are taking software that is going to interpret your business processes for this organization. That's not trivial.
Right.
So yeah, I go into organizations and I'll do 2 days of discovery with them to understand what they do, how their data is organized right now, how they want to use it. I mean, you have to, it's a lot, it's not just about the technology.
Right, right. So real world from, this is the first I've never heard of CiviCRM before now. I decide that, it's something I want to try. Realistically speaking, for a small sort of installation to try it out, what kind of time investment?
Well, my half-hour estimate was that if I want to install it and I want to run through the high points, it's an installation checklist. After you install, there's a link. It says run through this list and it gives you this, 20 items or something like that, and it marks it off after you've visited that. And a lot of it's simple, like enter your organization's name and the email address for the from emails, and what components do you want to enable and disable within Civi, and do you need to review any option lists that you might configure. So it runs you through all those. A lot of them you're in and out really quickly. Some of them, like if you need to get a payment processor set up and you don't have that handy, it has not been done, well obviously there's work to be done outside of the system in order to do that, and then configure it within Civi. So there's things that are going to stall you along that process because there's other aspects taking place. But if I was to install it, and just run through that checklist, for the most part I can do it in half an hour. You're going to come back later though.
The question I'm asking though is like,
You need
how
to
much?
study this product for many weeks to get anything done.
Okay, so.
It definitely takes an investment of
So
time.
huge
You won't
investment
even
of
know what
time.
it does
All right.
until you spend weeks, not days.
Yeah.
So probably until you have a paying client, you probably ought not make the
Oh,
investment.
well, if
You might work with a
I would get started
consultant on
now.
the first one until you wrap your head around it, but it would be a wise thing perhaps if you have to leave for the consultant, you call somebody like your mother.
But if you want to develop that expertise, then I would go ahead and install it, and I dabble with it. When you got a lunch break or something like that, go in there and just play with it, and come up with a fictitious organization. Look at the resources online for walking through configuration, things that you want to consider and take into account. I wouldn't. We all want paying clients to invest in our own training and new software, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, right. No, you're right, absolutely.
Yep.
Just look back at the events management. Got a client that currently uses J events. Would it substitute that, including things like the calendar module, the calendar component, and the upcoming events? Would it replace that?
Well, J-Events doesn't really have registration tools. They might have.
On a latest one has the RSVP, which works, but this seems a lot.
Yeah. So this is more geared. So there's no calendar. Anything to answer that question? There's no visual calendar that ships with this. Now I've used JCal because JCal accepts RSS feeds and iCal feeds, and Civi will produce an iCal feed. So you can take that iCal feed and ship it over to JCal and not have to do any kind of data transfer. So I've done that to be able to expose, but there's some other things that people have done along those lines to basically expose a calendar template. Nothing out of the box. The biggest thing that Civi does that J-Events or JCal does not do is all the actual registration. Those other tools are more just a calendaring software. So you plug it on there and promote it, but you're not actually registering people.
Because Civi has chosen not to adhere to the Joomla structure at all for their extension, does it limit any integrations with other third-party extensions in Joomla? Basically, we're running our own software of Civi inside Joomla, but it doesn't really help in any way with the rest of Joomla.
Well,
is there a plugin trigger system throughout
yes.
Civi
Yes.
for the Joomla plugins?
Yes. Yeah. And there's they call them hooks, which is borrowing from the Drupal, but it's basically the same thing as an event. How we term events, and they can be triggered from plugins. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate that tomorrow. So if you want to come to that. And there's a lot of different hooks. You can do just about anything simply within a plugin. You got a lot of control over things.
Will it integrate with other extensions, like John Social or other such?
So that's going to take an integration plugin. You're going to have to tie that connection. There's nothing that's really built in that does it, but that's true of anything. There's modules that are just pulling information from Civi to expand it. There's plugins and other extensions. There's some components on the JED that has like there's one component out there that provides some control over article authoring based upon membership in Civi. So people have built all kinds of integration with it, but that's kind of outside the system. There's a robust API, there's a robust event hook system, and so if you want to to build that.
Is the presentation available as well as the?
I was going to ask Fred, or maybe someone knows if we are submitting. I'm happy to submit that.
And it'll probably,
Yeah, okay, great.
other technology glitch will be available.
We're going to ask Brian. We have an empty session tomorrow. Brian's speaking again tomorrow. We have an empty session tomorrow, so I think we might ask you if we can have a question and answer networking session.
That'd be great. That'd be fun. Happy to do that.
All right.
So I think my session tomorrow is at the very end of the day, so that's got to be somewhere earlier.
It's earlier than that, yeah.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
Cool. All right, thank you
Thank
all
you,
very
Brian.
much. So does anyone want to win a book?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
give me some business cards and I'll put it behind my back and be creative here.
Here's a hat.
Here's a hat. That's fine. I'll ask someone else to pull it. So. That's a good idea.